Welcome to the SENDcast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the Managing Director of B Squared and I'm the host of the SENDcast. It's a podcast for special educational needs and disabilities. Each week on the podcast, we talk about a different topic within the world of SEND to improve our knowledge, to provide support to professionals working in schools and to empower parents. Kate Browning joined me this week and we were discussing informal SEND provision in mainstream primaries. What are the positives and what are the pitfalls? Kate is an independent consultant supporting schools around inclusion and improvements around SEND. And Kate has been a SENCO, a SEND advisory teacher, local authority and school improvement officer for SEND and an interim education development officer for NASON, amongst many other things. B Square. Now, we are the company behind this podcast and we have been helping schools since 1997. We've been breaking down the curriculum and different frameworks into smaller steps before P-levels even existed. And Connecting Steps, our assessment software, has been around for 25 years now. It's our biggest product and it's used to celebrate the progress pupils with SEND make, however complex, and we go from the lowest level all the way up through to young people gaining their independence. And we also have Eversense. Eversense is our evidence for learning and parental engagement platform that really helps build the bridges between parents and schools. We also have this podcast and we also have our SENDcast sessions, which are video CPD on the same website. So go to the B Square website, click on the meeting link, and you can find out from me what all our software can do for you. Now, let's get on with the podcast. On this week's show, we're discussing informal SEND provision in mainstream primary. What are the positives and what are the pitfalls? I am joined this week by Kate Brown, and Kate is an independent SEND consultant who focuses on school improvement for pupils with SEND. She has been, and I'm giving you the short version, a SENCO, SEND advisory teacher, local authority and school improvement officer for SEND, and an interim developmental officer for NASON. She's taught the NASENCO, and she now teaches in the SENCO MPQ, and among many other roles, she does a consultancy work. She facilitates SENCO networks for schools across Leicestershire, Warwickshire, Coventry, and she's also an experienced governor. It's a long list. Welcome to the show, Kate.
Hi, Dale. Really good to be with you again. Thank you.
I ran out of breath in all of that. So, schools are embracing inclusion, not purely out of choice, but due to the limited availability of specialist placements. And with time pressures, increasing demand, many are having to jump in with both feet, often without the opportunity to really plan what is truly effective and supportive for their students. And it is great that schools are trying to be inclusive, but it is a complicated process and it's hard to get right, isn't it?
Yeah, and the landscape is changing as we all know over time. So we've had we've got a 25% increase in children with education, health and care plans in resource provisions. Now, I think it's 66% in the northeast alone. So we've got more children, and I know that the government are looking to enhance provision enhance resource provisions, designated specialist provisions. There's a whole load of acronyms for pretty much the same thing, but those that are funded by local authorities. But equally, and certainly I'm seeing a lot more schools setting up their own more informal provisions within school to support children who are, for one reason or another, at this point in time, struggling to thrive, develop, make progress in a mainstream class environment and schools for a number of reasons. Availability of staffing, sometimes it's about needing to create a base really within the school to be able to support those children's needs. Sometimes we have children awaiting special school placements as well, and yeah, it's an area that people are going in pretty blind really. There's not a lot of clarity and guidance around there. It's beginning to develop a little bit more, and I'd say that goes for resource-based provisions, commission-based provisions, as well as it does for this sort of more informal kind of provision as well. But this issue isn't going away. Is what
No.
we know. We do have children, particularly coming in at the early years now, who are pre-verbal and are a really early stage of development, and they're in our mainstream provisions and the traditional classroom context coming into, from our early years into our reception class and through to year one. It's not working for those children in the way. Well, the curriculum isn't working, but that's perhaps a different podcast. But yeah, so there's a chat, and I don't think that need is going away. So if we're talking in the government's drive for a more inclusive mainstream education offer, then this is the sort of arena that we need to be getting our heads around and looking at. Okay, so what does good practice look like in this context?
And does that parental choice, is that impacting this? Because I see on lots of groups that the parents have specified that school, they're named on the HCP, that school is saying we cannot meet their needs, they're so complex, we're not set up for this. Is it that kind of thing of the school, the local authority going, well, you can either really, really fight us or you take them? I wonder if that's adding to that, where the parents want their child in mainstream, however complex. And I think that's a really hard topic because I did a podcast with one of the Nation Award winners, and it was a really interesting thing which I'd never really thought about before. But they want their child to go to the same school as their brother.
Yeah.
They want to have that same opportunity. So there is inclusion is a really interesting thing because it's people talk about being in a resource base is a bit segregated and things like that. But actually going to the same school as your siblings is inclusive.
In your community with the kids that you live next door to on the street with, that you play with, and and I think what is inclusion? It's a sense of belonging, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think I can totally understand why parents want that, but that's not to be disingenuous to the challenge at all. And I think what we need to get to is, okay, if that's what we want, then what will it take? What would it take for our schools to feel confident that they can meet that kind of need? And what is the appropriate level of resourcing to support them to do it well? Because what we do know is we can't keep doing more and more and more for less and less and less. And so we can have this is what we want, this is where we want to get to, the principles, the value, but we need the support, the funding, the training, the guidance to make that happen, so it becomes a quality educational experience where children and young people thrive and schools feel confident that they know and that they can meet need. Yeah.
I've talked to a number of resource bases or resource revision, additional resource, however the current acronym for that week is. ARB, ARP, whatever it is. And what I like when I talk to a lot of them, one of my concerns is like that provision is they can't cope in mainstream, they're disrupting everyone else, let's get rid of them somewhere else. And that unit operates quite often in my head, hearing the way they talk about it, it operates in isolation. It is almost like the dirty part of the school is kind of how they kind of talk about it. Then the ones I've talked to, they are seeing the impact the provision is having, and that impact kind of spreads throughout the school, that whole school becomes more inclusive, because they can see actually for this child, which I thought would never get anything done, they never work, he's sitting there writing and he's doing his work. So what's changed? And I think by seeing it, it is making schools become more inclusive.
Oh, Dad, I couldn't agree with you more. I just, we become more inclusive in our schools, one child at a time. We get to, and we get to know that child, and sometimes they are knotted balls of wool, and we try to find the end of it. And what's going on? I don't even know where to start. And you read the section F, and you read the section A and B and C and D in your education, health and care plan. Just think, crikey, O'Reilly, how are we going to do? But we slowly get to know that child. We use our assess plan, do review. We take it a day at a time. We get some extra specialist support and training and advice and guidance in to try and help us unpick what's going on. And, we crucially, we say, well, what would it take? What would it take to make this work? And then if we're trying to answer that question for ourselves with support around us, guidance we can hold on to, then we are going to be using our best endeavours, and that's the duty and responsibility we have. But absolutely. But I think in there, Dale, you sort of began to touch on some of the potential pitfalls and dangers of when it's when there isn't really that clear rationale for okay, why do we need to set up something slightly different in our school context, so some sort of informal base, and the rainbow room, the butterfly room, people call them all sorts of different things, but we needing to have that clear rationale that the purpose behind this is over time to support that child's greater inclusion and ability to learn, develop and thrive in a mainstream classroom context. And some children, that takes a bit longer. Some children just need a bit more time, Dale.
They do.
Let's not. What I worry about is when this kind of provision is set up and it feels like it's either a destination. Okay, that's where they are now going to be for the rest of their time when they're with us in school, or alternatively, it's a stepping stone out to special school provision. And I'm not saying that might not be for some children, that might not be appropriate, but hey, let's have
the door should be two ways.
Let's give children a bit of time and let's see what we can offer. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm really not. I really need to keep it under review. But for me, it's this kind of informal resource base, or actually even if it's a designated specialist provision or an enhanced resource provision that is commissioned, it's an intervention. And I just want to take Sarah Alstom's phrase here, not an out-intervention, which I quite like. We need to see it as gradually that offer that we can put in place at school, gradually increasing that child's capacity to learn and thrive in the mainstream. So with that in mind, we've then got to think about, okay, what does that offer then look like? Yeah.
I think that bit about it being it's something you go into for a period of time, and he talks about that unknotting that ball and working out where do you start. And I think when you have that resource provision, when you have a better staff-student ratio, you can spend more time with that puzzle.
Yes.
You can spend time unlocking it and trying to solve it and work out the clues. But once you have that, you can really change that child's trajectory. Yeah. And as you said, the aim is to learn about them, learn what they need, kind of get that change, and then get them back into the mainstream classroom. But one of my worries is, and again, I see SENCO groups that I'm in, which are really supportive, and then I see teaching groups I'm in, which are not. And I think there is that thing, which is the responsibility of that head teacher to make sure there is that right culture around that provision. Yes. So the head teacher and the SENCO might be a complete agreement of this is this, it's about getting them in and getting them out. But if that's not what the other teachers are feeling, if I can't cope with them, they'll go to that place, I'll never have to deal with them again. And they see it as you're disrupting everyone else. It's not about them, it's about, we've got to make sure that the whole school is on board and wants to learn and support this provision. And children will go, and they will hopefully, that is the aim, to come back to you, and you will learn what you need to tweak to support them.
Absolutely. And, I think when schools are thinking about setting this kind of thing up, you can imagine these SLT meeting, they've had discussions, SENCO's in there, what are we going to do? We know we've got some children already with us, some children coming in from nursery, we know, then we do need to make sure we've got that clear rationale that is completely shared and understood by all staff. And we're not necessarily going to have everybody on the same page at the same time, but you're absolutely right. The leadership steer and direction on that has to be really, really solid. I know I've met teachers. I didn't, you know, who say, I didn't go into teaching to teach children like this. You know, they should be somewhere. Yeah, you know, my answer to that is this isn't going away. But I'm going to I totally acknowledge the challenge, and I feel your fear, because usually it's coming from a place of fear. I don't know what to do, you know. So I totally get that. But equally, in the way that the kind of provision is established or developed, we need to make sure that everybody, all teachers and staff in school, are understanding that they have a part to play in the education offer for those children. Otherwise, what you can see is it, the increasing social isolation, and not just isolation of children from other children, you know, children in the resource base from other children in the main school, but also you get this situation where there's only this few members of staff who actually deal with these children, and everywhere, wherever you go, whether in your playground, whether you're in the lunch hall, whether you're in assembly, whether you're, you know, you're seeing, they're just with the same staff all the time, and they become their children. And again, I'm not saying that for a period of time in that child's development, having that key adult isn't that. Sometimes that's going to be important, but we got to support and enable the children to develop beyond just having this one child and one TA sort of orbiting each other throughout the school day. Yeah.
I've talked to some schools where, and I think this is more in a secondary school, where it's kind of a split time. So some time is spent in mainstream, some time is spent in the resource provision. I kind of quite like, because it is meaning they are your children, they are yours, and you're going to teach them for X amount of time. Maybe we do the English and literacy, the literacy and numeracy together, but in the afternoon, when they may be struggling, they can come to the resource base and we'll work on those skills, but we'll also do it in an environment that helps them be themselves and to thrive. Gassing is not one rule. There's finding what works for your students in your setting.
Yes, and then you've hit on the nail on the head, really, around the challenges of setting up a resource base where it's kind of, and this is what all of the children will do. They will all do this at this point, and they will all do that at that point. And actually, what you almost certainly got in a resource base, if you've got sort of 3, 4, 5 very different, with very different needs, you know, even when you're doing something like attention autism, they could be at very different stages in that program. But sometimes I see everybody doing the same thing at the same time, and I know that's a timetabling nightmare. You know, there's the pragmatics around that, and that, you know, but yeah, I think, just speaking to that point, really it's sort of tipping back into what we were talking about earlier on, about the having time to really get to know and understand those children's strengths and their needs and their barriers to learning. And that's hard when we've got pre-verbal children, particularly at very early stages of development. So you're needing to be flexible and model to really look and see how that child is beginning to engage and communicate, and what they're motivated by, and what's your way in to beginning to enable them to take on board sort of adult-directed learning. So going back to the graduated approach, we start at assess. We start there. We get our magnifying glass close up to those children. We have, with children with this level of complexity, and even in that phrase is a difficult phrase, you know, complex needs. What do we mean by that? But what it does, what our response to that is we really need to really be really forensic about what we're seeing those strengths and needs and barriers to learning are. We'll probably need some specialist support to help us do that, in collaboration with our parents, families who know their child best. When we begin to unpick that and get to that through that knotted piece of wool, we'll then be able to say, okay, what does the offer need to look like for that child? So what are the barriers to that child being able to really thrive in that mainstream class context? Could it be all right in PE? You know, could we be all right in assembly times? Could we be all right maybe in art or geography or history or perhaps some elements of phonics? Who knows? You know, that might look different for different children, but we are, timetabling wise, the offer needs to be as much as possible in class, but maybe for those slightly lower arousal times, maybe when things are a little bit calmer, but increasing the capacity over time as they hopefully develop, and when they're getting sort of more intensive support around their particular needs, maybe sensory needs, social, emotional, mental health needs within the base, then we can increase capacity over time to be able to manage that mainstream context a little bit more. Yeah.
I think when we think of resource bases, we generally think of lower attaining. Yeah, there are those who are not in that kind of, everyone else is working here, they're working down here, it doesn't really fit in, really complicated, need to do extra staff. But actually there's another group of children which may be working at or near typical. You might not already know because they're the disruptive children, because they're not getting on with their work for whatever reason. And my wife has a child in her class who is working above his peers, but he can't cope in that mainstream classroom. So she has that, I'm going to say the word differentiated work. And she says that he just needs somewhere quiet, somewhere predictable, that he can get on with his work at his pace. And he does. It's not all the time. So when something goes wrong, he's disrupted and off we go. But for some children, it's the environment that needs changing, not the level of work. And it's working that out. Because they might seem disruptive and naughty and all that thing. When you finally peel it all back, you're like, you just struggle in that environment. You struggle with this. You don't. Let's remove that. What can you do? And you realise that some of these children in the resource base, actually, it's not educational. They're there for it's these other things. And then if you can work out how to support them, you'll hopefully be able to get them back into mainstream. But then you've got the other group who do need that support with what they're doing and that ongoing. So as you said, it's not, you can't do everything for everyone. You're going to have completely different needs. Even with 6 children, that could be 6 different things.
Yeah, and it's and therein lies the pragmatic challenge in schools of how do we get staffing, to manage that as well. So yeah, it isn't easy, but if we start from a position of trying to figure, the child in your wife's class, for example, just trying to, she got to the bottom. Oh, it's the environment. It's actually not the level of challenge with the work. It's actually, that's what I'm struggling to cope with. So, yeah, having maybe an individual workstation or e-defenders or whatever it might, or actually addressing some of those sensory needs in. Before we come into learning based, that's going to hopefully enable that young person to be able to thrive in and access learning in the everyday classroom context, and doesn't need to just be sent out.
And that's the thing is, as you said, intervention is you kind of do that one child at a time. So when that child, you get that environment right and they start doing work, and then you share that with the classroom teacher, their initial response will be, they did not do that, you did that, or what did you do, how hard was that, what was it? And you go, no, you just had a quiet place when you got on. And I think it's that sort of thing. They've made their mind up about that child, and being in that resource base should be that chance for them to rethink what they know of that child.
Yeah, and always be prepared to be surprised.
Yes.
I think that's really, really important as reflective practitioners, that I remember that as a teacher myself, and I sometimes, we talk to when they're talking, teachers talk about that this child is never going to manage. They're never going to manage in Key Stage. They're never going to manage in Key Stage 2, and I just think, well, that Year 6 Leavers Assembly. Every year, do you pick a child that you see and you think, crikey, I remember you? when oh God, I never would have imagined you could be standing up saying this, doing that, yeah, crikey, and I think, yeah, we need to be prepared to be surprised, I think. But just getting to what a point you were making there about, I think it's important that we see the children, the support base that we're using, as giving them extra time, additional support, focus on core aspects of learning and development that maybe aren't quite there, that are as an intervention to help being able to access mainstream classroom, bit by bit, incrementally, more readily and easily. But also it goes the other way. So we also need in our mainstream classes to be able to be thinking, how can we be more ready to meet that child's needs in the class as well. So it's a two-way process. And I think talk right at the top of the podcast, you talked about at schools where we're having and making provision for more complex needs children, one child at a time. We become more inclusive practitioners, and I think our universal offer grows as a result of that. So some of those approaches that they might be using in the base, well, how can we transfer those back into the main class context? So it is things like maybe an individual workstation, taking that child's individual visual timetable, bringing it into the class. Maybe if we're talking about children at very early stages of development, we're talking sign symbols, that are used by the class teacher and other peers as well. So again, that you're increasing the inclusive offer in the main class as well. So it's not just about the child changing, it's about the environment as well becoming more inclusive as we learn more about what supports and helps that child, what their strengths are, what their challenges are, how they communicate best, what they're engaged with and love, and also that opportunity to build relationships with peers. Because if they're always in the base, you take them out of a base with 3 or 4 other children and you put them in the class with 30 odd, who they don't have relationship with, and the class teacher who hardly ever sees them, then that you're creating a barrier there, aren't you?
Yes.
So we need to make sure that's a two-way process. And some of the best examples I see out in schools is where the focus of the teaching and the support in the base is led and wherever possible delivered by teachers as well. That's not always easy, particularly when you have an informal base that you've not additional funding for this. So often it is quite TA led, but it's still really close oversight for the planning. We've still got those high expectations of what we're offering to those children and what they can achieve. Might take them a bit longer, but we're going to still maintain those high expectations. So making sure there is that level of rigor around the planning as well.
And talking about kind of going back into the classroom, is you might have teachers going, yep, great, I can see he can do that over there. I can see he can do that where there's just 5 other children in the classroom. And when you're giving him this, well, I can't do that, so that can't work in here, so he'll have to just. And what I think is I think most children accept that the world isn't perfect. But they can't have that silent classroom. But if you make some adjustments, if you are seen, if you're talking to them going, I can't give you this, but what would work? Where could we sit you in the classroom to help you? And if you have that relationship with that professional and that child is seeing that teacher is believing in them, that belonging, that thing, when they're being pushed out of that classroom, that relationship is not there with that teacher.
Yes, absolutely.
When they're bringing that, it has to be there. You have to show that I can't give you that exact perfect environment which will make you strive so much, but I will do the best I can.
Yeah,
that works.
Yeah, and we just stepping stone our way there. So what it might be, first of all, is actually the teacher goes to the base with maybe a few other children, and we do some support and teaching in that, and then we use some of the resources and approach and timetabling and however that works, and then we actually take that context and then bring it back into the classroom. So we graduate it. Yeah, so we don't go cold turkey, on a Monday morning. Suddenly, right, you're in. I know you. That's what you used to do this week. Yeah, so we graduate that, and maybe maybe we put ear defenders on. Maybe we do that. Maybe we do have a separate part of the classroom just on the edge that maybe near the door. So if actually things do kick off, that's fine. We're okay. It's all right. And often with children, when we're making these sort of transitions, it doesn't run smoothly. Sometimes it's, one step forward, two steps back a little bit. But let's try, all right? And maybe we will learn a little bit more about that child in the trying and maybe what adjustments we might now need to make. But not that, we tried that on Tuesday morning, it didn't work, so they're back, that's it. Forget it. It's not going to work,
And the ear defenders is if they have them available, and they may choose to put them on, they may choose not to. They might, but if it's available and they can, they might sit there and listen to you, and then as soon as you finish going, I need to put these on, I need the quietness now, and I'll do my work in my quietness. But it's got to be something that can be done, and it's got to be that you are not allowing it, in that's kind of, you're allowed to because I've been told you have to, but actually I'm encouraging and supportive of you doing it because it makes you comfortable, and it means you can be in our classroom with everyone else and enjoying learning. If that's how you need to enjoy your learning, then that's fine. Let's accept it.
Yeah, and in an ideal world, we have our ear defender little rack in the corner of the classroom, and anybody can use them. Yeah, I mean, I've got noise cancelling earphones that I sometimes use. Why can't they be available for all? Yeah, and maybe at the moment, okay, we're just going to do 5 minutes, and then and then maybe we build up to 10 minutes, and maybe Christmas comes and we come back and we go back to 5 minutes again. That which often happens, and then we build up a little bit more. I also think there's something in here, Dale, about ensuring that the other children in the class understand those children's needs, where they might struggle as well. So we are, educating the wider class as well. And I've seen that done so brilliantly, where you talk to other children, they say, "Oh yeah, that's Jamie. He finds this a bit difficult, so we help him by doing this." And I will, not that you want the mothering kind of thing, which sometimes happens, but yeah, it's just normalising that difference.
I think the judgment around it for children isn't there. Someone comes in with a broken leg, everyone goes to help them and move chairs and move tables and do you want to sit in my
Children
seat?
Aren't the problem. Yeah.
And it's like they're not judgmental. Oh, he needs ear defenders, right? And it's just that I think the judgment comes later on, or the judgment comes as we watch much more media and the media tells us what's good or bad. But I think for children, they accept differences.
Yeah.
And they're often asked questions of, well, why do you need? I just struggle with loud noises. Okay, so what you've kind of said is be less noisy near you. Cool, I can do that because that's because I know it impacts you. And John in our office, he has noise cancelling. We all have, when we do all our meetings, we have our noise cancelling so we can concentrate on the meeting. He wears his most of the day for one reason. He gets interrupted less because people are thinking in the meeting or he's listening to music. So having those headphones on can also be a cue that I don't want to socialise.
Yeah, and as I say, let's have some headphones. Let's just have a set of 3 or 4 that anybody in the class can use, and the sort of the workstations. You can get. I used to make them out of cardboard boxes. And I had 5 or 6 of them in the corner of the classroom where anybody could go and get them, and they put them on the desk in front of them, and it just sort of is a trifold thing that you sit around. So you need to concentrate and focus. So it wasn't this is his station. This is where he. Actually anybody can, and again you just that's sort of more inclusive approach, and it's again normalising differences and recognising that we're all on that. neurodiverse kind of pathway in some way, shape or form.
If you just have the one, then people will look. And the other reason their child's using it is they don't want people to look. So every time they look up, there's like, why is everyone looking at me? So the more you normalise it, the less people will look and the more impactful it'll be. And the more, actually, when he realises people aren't looking and everyone's doing it their own way, again, their confidence grows.
I think that's almost certainly, what can happen there,
So I know we've talked about the aim of everyone. We want everyone to go to the result into that provision and come back. But as we know, the same with EHCPs. Not ideally, we want support without EHCPs, but there will always be those who need EHCPs. And I think there's always going to be those children who go into these provisions where you're understanding their needs, you're kind of unwrapping that ball and trying to work out how big that puzzle ball is. And especially, I think, as they get older and hormones get involved, is actually for some of these children, the mainstream isn't right. But that is probably less than people think.
I think it's about what I mentioned earlier on. I sometimes think it's about giving children time.
Yeah.
I think it's about unpicking and getting to understand those needs as early upstream as we possibly can. And that may or may not need an education, health and care plan. If we can put more resourcing and funding and specialist support further upstream into schools, the less likely I think we are going to be needing to need education, health and care plans and continuing to ever increase our specialist provision offer. But I do think for some children, what has been our traditional education offer does need to look a bit different. For some children, it really does. So I think, but that just can't. I mean, I think that's schools are being really creative and evolving and being innovative off their own backs because they're amazing. And we have some absolutely fabulous schools leaders, SENDcos, who are just going, I just want to give them what they need. I are thinking, what will it take? What can we do? What is within our resourcing and our power and our ability to be able to do that? So we do have some really good innovative practice going on that we need to share and develop and widen and broaden and resource appropriately, so that we can really evolve what that mainstream education offer can look like. But I think early upstream as possible. We do need our specialists to help schools do that, and certainly the resource provisions that I work with or review and look at in schools where we've got good collaboration with speech and language therapists, autism specialists, our specialist teaching teams within local authorities, etc., educational psychologists. They help in designing what that offer is and crucially keep it under review, help keep it under close review. That's always a really good practice going on there.
And as you say, if you could have that child coming into school, starting to struggle, let's spend some time in that provision. Let's work out their needs. Let's work out how to support them. Cool. This is kind of the playbook for this child. Cool. Can we implement that in mainstream? Yeah. Right. Let's implement that. Let's transition them back in. Cool. They're now coping in mainstream with a few tweaks. And that's kind of going to repeat, isn't it? As children kind of struggling, as you said, it's time. We need time to unpick, and that informal provision can be that time to unpick, identify those needs. Then how can we support that? Practice that, demonstrate it, bring that back into the classroom, and by just those changes in the classroom, which don't always have to be big. Everyone thinks they're big changes. They're often not. They're often small changes that actually, when you create something, you think about it then, no adaptation later on needed, or small adaptations, or you just give them ear defenders on a rack, available workstation stuff. You give them chair bands, anything like that to just help them concentrate. A few tweaks, they can thrive in that classroom. But that is kind of what I think when I see provisions and all the stuff I've talked about, that's kind of the route they're taking. It's all about getting them back into that classroom. And one of the ones I talked to, which was up in Doncaster way, that provision takes children from other schools.
Yeah.
But the rule is the teachers from that school come and see the child and see what they are capable of. And it always blows them away and what they can do. And it helps them see that child in a different way. And then they go, well, how? What? I want him to be like this in my classroom. How can I get him like this in my classroom? But you have to, I think, having that time, partly it's for that child so you learn them, but part of that teacher who hasn't had the time to learn them, you can now show them actually what they're capable of. And that's powerful.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about there is one of the purposes of informal resource bases, or indeed funded resource bases, is allowing us to just slow down a bit, because and it's a phrase I've used many times before, sometimes we have to slow down before we speed up. Sometimes we just have to take a little bit more time, and I think and it's similar to the way I think what you're talking about there is sort of alternative provision being used to just slow everything down with that child again, and enabling some really skilled practitioners to be able to sort of unpick and what's going on with that young person, and just again to recalibrate what we know about where that child is in their head at the moment, and what in our learning environment is supporting and enabling, and what is actually more exclusionary and is a barrier to them thriving in our mainstream education context. But I think you've hit on something there that I think is important to talk about, and that is you talked about when that teacher saw that child in that context. That's not the child I recognise, and I think that's important too. So even within an informal in-school provision or resource-based provision, time for other staff, in the school to spend time in that base, away from the melee of the slightly larger main the class context, actually having time to work with those children, teach those children, engage with learning activities, whatever they might be, is really important. So we don't see the resource base or the informal provision as being something that is it's a bit, it's all alchemy that goes on in there. It's something, you have to, only that TA in the SENDco know what's going on there. And some of the best school practices I've seen are where every subject leader in the school is given time every term to teach their subjects with those children. So they're getting to know those children. So when they're doing their monitoring of how well their subject is being taught, and the progress children are making, that includes the children from who are spending time in the resource base as well, and every TA across the school is given an opportunity to work with and alongside those children as well. Crucially, because people go off sick, people move jobs, and if actually you've had a child all this time who's only ever spent time with that one TA in orbit with each other throughout the school week, we're going to come crashing down when that person's potentially off sick or moves job. Just having those opportunities, and that's a professional development learning opportunity as well, and making sure that when specialists are coming in, maybe to look at the support and the provision for that child, any other assessment going on, actually that's not just done in conversation with the SENDco or the TA that happens to be predominantly working around and with that child, but actually with the main class teacher as well, and maybe other teachers in the school, and that information is shared. So again, we're back to that ethos, that culture around how that provision is operating at a whole school level, and everybody feeling that they are invested in those children, growing the inclusive offer for those children, understanding their needs, and adapting provision, practice, curriculum, school environment to make it incrementally easier, breaking down those barriers to support those children incrementally being more able to thrive in a main school context.
And I like that bit about the TAs kind of cycling through, because it's like, oh yeah, you're doing it, you really know what you're doing, but like I could never do that. But actually, by having that opportunity to go in there and see actually how I need to change, the impact of it changing, and then me going, I wonder if that would work with the people I'm supporting. I'm going to try that. And suddenly you're seeing the impact, and you're now going, I get it. And it's that changing one child at a time, but you can change one adult at a time. But you need to see it working. And there are people who are listening to this podcast and be going, no, 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 until they see it. And when they see it, they'll believe
and
it.
I think you've hit on there, Dale, the importance of going out and seeing what other schools are doing. You know, just because that's what we all want, isn't it? I say, what does a good one look like? You know, especially as, and I think you may have read it in a TES article a little while ago now. The CEO of a trust in Kent had said that there's the potential for this kind of practice in school to become the Wild West of education, because nobody really knows what they're doing, and there's a bit more guidance coming through. There is a bit more research coming through around what does good enhanced resource provision or informal in school, sometimes called unit-based provision, actually what that looks like. But it's early doors. But yeah, going out, what does it look like? You know, working with special schools as well, because a lot of that, you know, that expertise, those approaches and skills that we can be bringing in into a mainstream context wherever possible. That's all, you know, going to be good practice as well.
I mean, we think of what's the outcome we want for these provisions. If a child's going, what is the outcome we want? And to me, it starts with, we want that child to enjoy school again. To me, that's where it starts. Yeah. What does it take for that child to enjoy learning? What is it we have to tweak for them to enjoy and do their work and be proud of their work? Is it we have to change from handwriting to using a laptop or speech to text? Is it we need to give them that kind of workstation? Is it we just need a quieter? What is it we need to get them to enjoy? What is it we get them to kind of have that trust in the staff around them? And then, as you said, getting them back into the classroom, how can we get them to trust and build that relationship with that teacher? How can that relationship grow between those two? Because generally, if that child's enjoying school, everything else will follow after. We shouldn't be aiming for high achievement or results or progress. We should be aiming for enjoyment, because a child who's enjoying school will thrive.
I think I definitely think enjoyment is fundamental. You know, and whether we engagement that comes with enjoyment. You know, if children aren't engaging, they're not learning anyway, are they?
No.
So that's fundamental. I still think it's important that we do have high expectations, and because I know what we might be seeing at the moment is a child they're now transitioning into year one. We might have just about managed some of their needs in reception, but it's getting harder. And we are recognising the gap is the significance of the gap. We are that child is maybe not as strongly, you know, communicating in the way that other children are doing, but actually, we still need to be thinking, okay, but they can get there. Yeah, we do need a little bit more time, some more intensive support, but actually we're still having those high expectations. And I do think I was just doing the MPQ SENCO a couple of weeks ago, and one of the SENCOs said what she does is she thinks when she's dealing with a child where they're really struggling, we haven't got a diddly squat idea what we're doing here, and and the easiest, maybe they don't belong, maybe actually, this is just too difficult. But actually, she says, I think about that child when they're 25 years old, and I think, what would I if I met them again? What would what would I? What would that young person be doing, and what can I do now that can ensure I can see as a 25-year-old, look at them thriving in their life, and I think that's quite powerful.
It is.
Mindset to have. So I think, yeah, enjoying school, you're right, feeling a sense of belonging, engaging, experiencing success, but again, I go back to that prerequisite of we've got to get to know them, haven't we?
We do.
We've got to unpick what's going on, and that will continue to happen, because guess what? They change, but all the time, not putting limits and ceiling on potentially where they can get to.
I watched my daughter's doing her GCSEs, and there are subjects she enjoys, and she admits it's because of the teacher. The teacher she has a relationship there. She enjoys being in their lessons. They're fun. They're interesting. They seem to show attention. They seem to notice things about the students and respond to that. And my daughter wants to do so well in those subjects. She's not going to take them after GCSEs, but one of them she was trying to get a 9. And I'm like, my head I'm going, but you don't need to. You really don't need to. But she wants to, because she really enjoys, and the feedback she gets wants her to do more than other subjects she's struggling with, and she just doesn't like the teacher, and it's that hard to engage. And I think when you're 16, you can consciously understand that. I think when you're much younger in that primary, you probably don't understand why you're doing that for that person. You might have a child who is an absolute nightmare in school, absolute nightmare, won't do anything, but plays for the local football academy as their star player, has come along the most. And you're going, so they're capable of listening, responding, doing as they're told, doing everything, and they're rewarded for their progress. So what's different in school? What's the difference? They're capable, but something here is a barrier, unpicking that. And it does, I do feel, again, from my education, that a teacher who believes in you is probably, if you did it on the Education Endowment Foundation, is probably plus 9 months.
Yeah.
It's free. It's hugely, but it is that a teacher who believes in you and at any ability level, but understands you. My form tutor, when I was at, I didn't like school, and I turned up for the 20-minute registration 2 minutes before the bell without my tie on. He should have marked me late every day, but he just looked at me. He knew I was going to turn up and I'd be marked as present. Nothing was ever said because I didn't disrupt. And he got, and I wish I could find him now. I'd go give him a hug.
Yeah.
Because he got me.
He didn't sweat the small stuff.
He didn't sweat the small stuff, but he did push me where I needed it. He did things that I really, and I've had a few teachers who've done that, and I really look back on them and go, yeah, they're the teachers who really made a difference in my life. And it's just the ones who seem to get to know me.
And they get to know you, and they get you, as the phrase is. You knew that they understood your reality and saw, well, you're here. That's great. That's the bigger picture.
And that's a
well
teacher
done, Dale.
who said, if they ever said to me, I'm disappointed in you, that would have hurt.
Oh, that hurts. Yeah.
Any other teacher, but if one of them looked at me, heard something, went, I'm disappointed you did that, that would be like, that's worse than my parents telling me off everything. Those few teachers who knew me and got me saying something like that hurt.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things to pull out there. Your comment about the child who just loves the football, and I think there, just that mindset of a strengths-based approach, looking at what is that child really good at, really interested in, what does engage them. And you know what, we can find that out even with pre-verbal children, by really looking closely at what is it that excites them, and going with that through to children who, football is what gets me. And also the importance as well, not knowing what that 25-year-old child is going to be doing. Let's not put ceilings on that, but all that the importance of the broad and balanced curriculum offer. So we're not, within it resource-based provision offer, we're not taking everything away, stripping that the broader, wider education experience away from children. I get that, there are core skills, and particularly for children who are working at a pre-subject specific level of learning, that we do need to be focusing on sort of communication, things like that, but we still need to be keeping that broad offer, so they are not being that their education experience, their education offer isn't being narrowed down, because who knows what's going to grab them and engage them, and that may well be our way in.
I think when you just do English, it can get a bit boring. But when you start doing English in the context of you doing history and you like the Romans, or lots of kids like Greeks and the Percy Jackson, all that lot, you can do English. You're doing English, you're doing the communication skills, but actually you're trying to find something they can hook into.
Yeah.
And there are other skills, but also if their skill is over there, we should go visit that skill and celebrate those strengths.
Yeah. And there we need that connected curriculum between what children are doing in the main class context and what some of them might be, the offer from the base, and they really just need to be the synergy there. So we are keeping them. Otherwise, if it's so separate, how are we going to enable that child to go back and incrementally become more part and belonging and thriving and engaging in a mainstream class context, if actually that the offer has been so separate and so different? Yeah.
I'm not going to go into the whole conversation of relevance of curriculum for young people. I'm not going to start.
Yes.
That's a whole other podcast.
Well, yeah, and I sort of alluded to that right at the beginning of. Yeah, that needs to change. We need to. Well, fingers crossed for the curriculum assessment review.
Double cross.
Everything's crossed.
I'm really hopeful. I watch what my daughters go through. I think about what I do, and I'm sort of going, there's so much scope for change, because they seem to be just doing the same. Certain subjects her Spanish is phenomenal. But some of the stuff they're doing in maths seem to have gone backwards from what we did. So I do find some changes really odd. But then I find some things just haven't moved, and I find that odd.
Yeah, there's been a recent review, wasn't there, into the GCSE curriculum for maths, and that it is too overloaded. I think that's basically what the curriculum assessment review, they've said overall is the curriculum is just too much.
And if anyone says it's all valid, to me it's like, you've got 2 hours to get around the Natural History Museum. Go. You literally run around it all. You come out, what did you learn? Nothing, but I got through it all. I kind of feel watching my daughters.
My feet are killing me, but yeah.
I kind of feel that the overloaded curriculum's doing that, and I get everything is relevant in that Natural History Museum. It's really interesting.
Yes, it's a nice analogy.
But if we did half of it, I would have taken it in, I would have built some skills, and I could have chosen to revisit the other half later on with those skills I've collected. But I could have also had time to stop and go, why is that? I think rushing through a curriculum destroys curiosity.
Yeah. And I think going back to time, you've hit it again. It's sometimes our children need a bit more time. And the way the curriculum is sort of structured, there isn't a lot of time, but they're year 2, they should be doing. They're year 3 and they should be doing that, but they're year 4 and they should be. But actually, being able to slow things down actually means we can speed up a little bit later if we just take time to get some of the basics in as well. which is often what this in school resource provisions or informal provisions are trying to do, give children that little bit more time. Yeah.
I'm going to wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you for the conversation. It's been really nice to have you back on.
It's been lovely being here again, Dale, with you.
I think it's been like 3 or 4 years since you were last on.
It's been a few years.
So it's been nice to have you back.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
I'll be putting contact details as always in the show notes, and you'll be able to find out more about what we do, and also be linked to some of the Kate's podcasts that we've recorded previously. So thank you for listening to the show. If you haven't subscribed already, click on that subscribe button, and if you go to a website, you'll find all the different platforms we're on. We also now put these out on videos on YouTube, so you can actually watch us rather than just listen. But what you'll probably do is put it on and then put something over it and just listen anyway. That's what I would do. And don't forget, you can follow us on all the social medias, on Twitter at the SENDcast, on Facebook, the SENDcast, on Instagram, the SENDcast, on LinkedIn, I think it's just under B Squared at the moment. We're on TikTok, and we're also playing with Blue Sky.
Oh.
The new one. Seeing what happens. And if you want to get in touch, let us know your thoughts, suggest topics or anything else, please send an email to hello@thesendcast.com. And here at B Squared, we've been helping schools since 1997 to support children and young people with SEND. We have been breaking down curriculums and frameworks into smaller steps before P-levels ever existed. Connecting Steps, our assessment software, is our biggest product. It can be used to celebrate progress for a wide range of students, from the most complex to young people working towards independence. And EverSense is our evidence for learning and parental communication platform, and it helps bridge the gap between parents and school. And we have this podcast, but we also have our SENDcast sessions, which is our online CPD around SEND. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our products and how they can help you. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the SENDcast. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.